Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now, if you're wondering why these guys aren't whizzing around on the whizzy thing, it's because trying to get 6 guys, 4 of which are on a square base, to actually work on that thing is a bit of a mission. So you get the scenic route instead. Now these guys are the new French infantry in Greatcoats in plastic from Wargames Atlantic, in collaboration with Piano Wargames, who I have raved about on the channel at length before. What I'm going to show you today is relatively simple, but I am going to give you a few tips on finding other colors for things, and I think as you'll go along you'll see that, man, the color doesn't really matter all that much to what you're using, just pick something that looks good. So there'll be a short review at the beginning, and I will make sure that there's timestamps throughout so that if you want to jump straight to the painting, you can get there too. I am going to repeat myself a couple of times because these aren't scripted, of course, so bear with me. All the same, all of the paints will be listed in the description below. The same as always, let's get started. So first things first, we'll take a look at the miniatures themselves. Now, full disclosure up top, Wargames Atlantic did send me a box of these guys for free for the purposes of a review. So just so you know that one out of the way. Now, it is worth pointing out, I think, as well, that I have personally backed all of the Piano Wargames Kickstarters because I really like the miniatures. So I don't think it's so much a question or not of whether these guys are good. I think it's more, have they survived the transition to plastic? So that's what I'm going to look at today, rather than, are Piano Wargames miniatures nice? Because yes, they are. You've seen them a few times on the channel by now. Now, 28 multi-part hard plastic miniatures. It is worth pointing out there are 20 infantrymen, and then there's 2 frames which are for command and skirmishers. And I'll show you those in a second. It did catch me out though, because if I flip this around, the example regiment they've put together does give you some clues about how this is meant to be used. So it's sort of ideally as a regiment for a war game, one regiment in a box with everything you're going to need. However, if you spot, there are the flank companies on both sides, and that's going to come up when I talk about the arms. There are heads enough to give everybody the crazy old bicorns, if you like, but the arms are a bit of a tricky one, because if you are going to make up all 20 as basic infantrymen, if you do plan on making the entire box of 20 infantrymen as just basic fusiliers, what's going to happen is you're going to have to change up how the front and rear rank are actually walking. So you might put march attack pose in the front, shoulder arms in the rear, or what have you. I'll explain a little further as we go along. But let's pop this aside, because one of the things I really love, and we're seeing more of in Wargames Atlantic boxes recently, is a wee bit of paper with not instructions, but actual pointers on what everything is. Super handy. Flip it over. Colors. I found this really useful actually guiding my own research here. I'm going to keep things relatively simple, but these are super. Really, really handy to have. Stefan Huber has done some pretty awesome research for the painting and what have you, and that's been shared here as well. So flipping this around again, let's sort of briefly point to these 3 poses here. Now this is what I was talking about, because on each of the basic infantry frames, what you have is 5 bodies, but then for each pose, you've only got 3 of the same arm set. So whether it be shoulder arms, high portée, whatever. So if you want to make a whole regiment, then you are going to have plenty, because you've got your grenadiers and what have you, the voltigeurs who've got the tassels on their shoulders, and you can then make up all of the fusiliers with the same arms. It's just something to be aware of. I don't think it's a deal breaker, because the idea that it's a wargaming regiment in a box is pretty handy. Just something to point out up the top. I think it is one to be aware of going in. As well, I do like the little touches of things like cooking implements, spare shoes, the knife, fork, spoon sets, these sorts of things. Nice little things to have. I'm not going to attach any of them because I'm in kind of a rush here, but they are options on the frames. I think that's sweet. So, did they survive the transition to plastic? Yeah, without question. Spoiler warning, they're great. One of the things I really like about the Wargames Atlantic sets tends to be that a lot of thought goes into where these little sprue gates are. So when you've got this great big hole in the center where the plastic is being forced into the void in the mold and spreads throughout, these little gates are where it's flowing through the frame and then filling up the piece. For the most part, these are really well done, and the heads are a great example here because nobody's got a gate on their face. I have seen some kits where you've got a mold line running straight down the center of a face or something. These have been very carefully done. Any gates that you need to trim off are in areas that are going to be easy to reach. So the sides of the hat, easy peasy. These guys with it underneath their neck joint, it's just wonderful. There was one body, and I cannot remember which of them it was, but the only one that stood out was that I think it's this one here, has a gate which is right up against a curve in the coat, which was a little bit tricky to file down and smooth out. Minor thing, especially given the rest of the kit. It's just wonderful. Piano Wargames in plastic, you cannot go wrong. Now the question that I have been asked the moment that I mentioned having these was, how do they scale up against the Perry Miniatures stuff? Short answer is exactly the same as the STLs and the metals. So because these guys are the same size as all the other Piano Wargames stuff, it's easy to find comparisons. They are, in short, about 1 millimeter, maybe 1.5 millimeters taller at the shoulder than Perry Miniatures stuff. Short answer is they'll work perfectly well in an army. They probably won't stand out against one another even in a regiment because, a tiny bit of variation in height won't look unnatural. They're great. That's the question that comes up. How do they fit against the Perry stuff? Tiny bit bigger, but you're never going to notice. So yeah, wonderful box, loads of options. Let's get painting some. So once you've got your miniatures assembled, first thing to do is to prime them. Now I've used here Brainmatter Beige from the Army Painter. You could very easily use white here. What I would suggest is that a very light, like an ivory color or something, which Brainmatter Beige is a good idea because it will give us a little that we can do to come up from white without having to do a lot of extra work. So anything that we leave Brainmatter Beige now is essentially going to be white, but we'll highlight it a little as we go. We'll start off with all of these guys, and to be fair, the uniform is the same for most of them, so don't worry too much. I have here Agate skin, and we're going to paint in, well, his skin. This will cover very well, but if you do need to come back and make sure that primer isn't showing through, just give it a second coat once this one has dried. Now, because I am working in a batch of 6 here, by the time I've finished painting the 6th guy's hands, I'll be ready to come back and give this first guy his second coat of paint. Now I'm going to start on the Grenadier because he's the first fella I picked up, and we're going to paint in their coats at this stage. Now I would recommend if you're going to use Vallejo colors, you might use here London Grey, which I actually was going to show you, but it turns out I don't have it. So instead I'm using here Deep Grey from the Army Painter. Now this will cover quite well. I have thinned this down just a little bit to make sure that it flows nice and smooth. You'll see a little bit of that streaking there, but that'll settle within a couple of seconds. Around we go, and when you come near areas that are going to be white or something later, slow your roll. Take a little bit of time there, but this is not too time consuming. You may find as you get to areas like up under, behind his sleeves and what have you here, that you want to swap to a smaller brush, but for the large bottom areas of the coats I would recommend fly through these first of all with a larger brush and then swap where you need to. You know what? That might be a little bit dark. What I'm going to do is grab one of the Fusiliers and I'm going to swap up here to Uniform Grey instead. I think this might be a little bit more fitting. This is part of the reason why I started with the Grenadier in the first place, because if it turns out that that other one was too dark, then, well, the Grenadier's just got a nicer coat with a tighter wool weave. Now there is the Uniform Grey, bit of a mess at the moment, but that's the colour. However, there's one last colour I'm going to try for the grey, and that is Basalt Grey. Let's just grab one of my Fusiliers here. This one is a Vallejo colour. A little bit of water in there, and let's go ahead and apply over the coat. Now this is closer to that more neutral grey that I sort of have in mind. A little bit lighter than the deep grey we used. but not quite as light as the uniform grey. So from left to right, we have the deep grey, uniform grey, and then basalt grey. I think, given the way that I'm going to do the rest of this, that uniform grey is going to work the best, but the other two are not going to be wrong. So put that aside, and I want to show you how I'm going to do the beige coats. Now the beige jackets, I know exactly what I want to use. I have here medium grey from Vallejo, which is a wonderful beige colour, and this will cover very, very nicely as well. A little bit of water in the paint, same as with all of them. But yeah, this will take just a moment or so. And this is perfect. Like, this is exactly what I wanted this one to do. You could also use German camo beige if you want a slightly darker finish, but this one I think is going to be spot on. So there's that medium grey, and I'm going to put him aside and grab another fella. Now this fella I'm going to use Tomb King Tan as the colour for his jacket, although Dusty Skull would also be quite a good one if you want a slightly darker finish. This though is about as close as you're going to get to the one we've just used. So yeah, again the idea is not to worry too much about the perfect beige, it's just what's going to cover relatively well and is in the right ballpark, and this definitely does the job. Now at the same time, you can pick a couple of guys wearing the oilskin covers over their shakos and paint those in with whatever beige you're using. For the most part, these would probably more commonly be black, but you would end up with a couple of them in the regiment who were using fawn or beige, whatever. This will work just as well. Now what I'm going to do is flip them around, and I've got here Satchel Brown, which I'm going to use for all of the packs. Now I've seen conflicting ideas about whether all of the pack was brown or were the edges trimmed in white. Honestly, I don't care that much. I just want to get these packs painted. So a quick splash of good old Satchel Brown will do the job. Now, as well as the packs themselves, you can spin them around, and this works pretty well on the straps, or the rope straps for some of these containers. Now some fellas are going to have a slightly different strap across their chest for their water container. I've just used that because it's what I've got out. The others we're going to paint in a little bit. What I'm going to turn to now though is flat brown. Let's flip them up here, and I'm going to paint over the entire musket. Not worried if I hit the metal work. The only part that I really want to try and avoid, as you'll see here, is the strap. But otherwise, straight over the whole thing. Now, for the fellows who have a slightly different strap across their chest, what I have is skeleton bone. And honestly, it occurs to me, I might have reversed these from the colors that they should be. I don't think so, but no, I'm not so sure. All the same, pop this on. And if you've got those gourds hanging from their sides as well, this is a pretty good color to paint those in. Actually, I tell a wee lie. What I'm going to get is some Command Khaki and use this as the sort of cork color for what I've got here. Okay, now we're going to get started on the metal bits. Now, in order to keep this nice and simple, what I'm going to use is plate mail metal. If you plan on coming back, you want to do a highlight over these guys, then it's a good idea maybe start from gunmetal instead. But I would suggest if I start from a lighter color here and I just wash it, leave it, just start from plate mail metal. So carefully over the bits close to the wood, and then you can smash this over this bayonet. But yeah, this will take a little bit of time because you do want to make sure that you're getting a nice straight edge on your muskets. We're starting to come near the point where we're going to start wanting to tidy up before our wash. So this is a good point to start putting in the colors for your tassels and what have you. Now for the grenadier and those nice red markings, what I have is vermilion. Now this is very, very bright going on. Covers relatively well, and once it is shaded, it's going to look the business. So as well as his epaulets, this is also going to go on the knot on his hanger and the little knot on his cartridge box here too. Now I don't really have any Vallejo color that quite matches this, so I'm going to use Eternal Hunt rather, for the epaulets here, as well as the base part of his pom-pom. And I'll also use this on the tassel on his cartridge box. And then a little bit of warped yellow for the yellow parts. So this is going to be the knot on his hanger, as well as the yellow parts of his epaulets, and up on top of the pom-pom. Now for the grenadier, what I'm going to use is Greedy Gold on the panel on the front of his bearskin, but as well I can use this for the handles on any of the hangers. So the little blades hanging from their equipment, the gold here as well. Now for the pom-poms on your Shakos, there are a few options because it's going to depend on which company in the regiment you are painting these guys as. Worth looking up which color sort of corresponds to which company, something I trust you can manage in your own research. What I'm using here is Ultramarine Blue, and I'm going to do this for all 4 of my Fusiliers so that the base I put them on will be a single company. Alright, now we're going to move on to the part where things really start to look like they're coming together, and that is with some black. Now I'm using here Vallejo Black because you can water this down and it does cover quite well. And that's really what I want to try and capture here, is something that's going to work nice and quick. So anything which is going to be black, at this point we just slap this over the top. Now you can stick to black for what I'm about to do if you fancy, but what I suggest, I have instead German grey. Now this is a very, very dark grey, almost a black, but it has a tiny wee hint of blue to it, so it's a little bit more visually interesting for certain things. I'm going to use it for the bearskin on the grenadier here. I'm also going to use it as the colour for the oil skins on the Fusiliers. Now those cloth covers over the cartridge boxes, I'm going to go back to Skeleton Bone from earlier, and this will cover very, very quickly, very, very nicely. Now for Shako straps, what I'm going to use here is Wasteland Clay. This is maybe a little bit lighter than it probably should be, but once we shade it, it's going to be alright. And on top of that, it's a good one colour solution for this sort of Shako strap thing. Now we can start doing our tidy up. Now I'm going to start with Brainmatter Beige, because remember we weren't starting from white, unless of course you did choose to start from a white primer, in which case here, use white. But all of these straps and what have you, this is going to look much better if we start from as close to clean as we can manage. So a little bit of Brainmatter Beige to tidy up, and I will do the same with the other colors. So anywhere that I've gone over the jackets or the hats or what have you, now's the time to solidify these base coats. Alright, now at last, the final thing to do, if you want to, is to grab a little bit of a brassy colour and paint in the buckles and what have you. I'm not going to. It does look cool, but it's a lot of extra work on every single infantryman, so I'm going to waive it for the purposes of this. What I am going to do is turn to marine juice. Now I've done whole videos on this before. I will link to one of those in the description, which will save me a bit of time here, and the recipe will be down there as well. What I'm using today is the Dark Tone Reichland Flesh Shade and Larmian Medium in equal parts mix. The idea here being that plenty of medium is going to keep it from staining too heavily. And as much as possible, I want to keep my brush moving down any coats, that sort of thing. Now, if it does collect anywhere too heavily, like once you've applied it, it all starts collecting at the bottom of his jacket, just shift it around while it's still wet. You don't just want to bucket this on and leave it. A little bit of work now, shifting it around while you still can, is going to save you some tidy up time later on. All the same, this is going over everything. So metal, skin, jackets, white, all of it. And then once you've got it on, we'll leave it for about half an hour to dry and see then what we've got. And then once it's had plenty of time to dry, what you're going to end up with is something that looks like this. And let's grab another fella for comparison. Yeah, man, you know, it's super easy. I reckon if you were to turn around and start with maybe Barbarian Flesh as the base color for the skin, you could just throw on the juice, especially after having tidied up those crossbars. I think that makes a big difference. But yeah, you could chuck them on the table like that and call them done. I do want to take a couple of steps further here. Just as a quick thought, while I'm doing the Fusiliers, of course, if you're going to be basing them in groups of 4, you can cheat a little. Plan ahead at this point and kind of select which ones are going to be your front rank and your rear rank. Highlight the front rank guys, but don't fuss with the rear rank dudes. Just a thought. It does work pretty well, but if anybody catches you out, then you sort of have to give them the old wink across the table. So, beginning our highlights, I'm going to go to Barbarian Flesh, as mentioned, and you don't have to be particularly careful with these. Now, what you really want to do is just accentuate some of the parts of the face that are going to be most visible. So, most of the face, so cheekbones, nose, chin if it's sticking out, and then as well, little bits on the back of the hands, just quick straight lines, will add a bunch to your figures. Now for your front rank dudes, and maybe your skirmishers as well, what I have is a little bit of ruby skin, and I'm just going to dot nose, chin, and a little on the cheekbones. You want to leave a bit of the barbarian flesh visible still, like you're not looking to completely cover that. But especially on the back of the knuckles, it just adds a lot more shape and definition. Like I said, skip this for you guys at the back. Now another good idea for your front ranks and your skirmishers, grab yourself some fresh matte white, and I might have a little bit much on my brush there actually, but just pick out a couple of the straps, add a wee bit of white to some of those where you want to accentuate the lines and make them look a bit cleaner. Now, when it comes to highlights, this one is really in the optional step stage, but it's worth having a go at it and having a look at what you like the look of. So I've popped a little bit of deep grey, and that was the base colour for the jacket on our Grenadier here. And then next to that, a little bit of Brainmatter Beige. Now, it doesn't have to be Brainmatter Beige. Any ivory sort of colour will work here. Try not to use pure white. It looks a little bit more chalky by comparison. But what we'll do is take just a little bit of the Brainmatter Beige and start guiding that into my deep grey. You'll see very quickly we get a slightly lighter finish there. What I'm going to do is stop before too long. I don't want to add too much. Then thin that down a bit. Then starting from his back here, always a good place to hide your highlights if they're not going to work out quite right, but I'm happy with that. Just a few quick straight lines to add a little bit of texture to his coat, following the shape of the jacket as much as you can. Now, I think, in retrospect, I've basically mixed up uniform grey here. But the idea is that that little bit of Brainmatter Beige or ivory, whatever you're using, it will work with pretty much any color that you're going to use for the coats. So it's a handy little universal highlight color to try. So what I'm going to do is do this to this fella here. Also do it to my Voltigeur and the 2 front rank blokies. All right. Now the last thing to do is to take them outside and hit them with a matte varnish spray. I'd recommend if you are looking to highlight the metalwork in any way, then varnish them first and pop the metal highlight over the top because it will allow it to sort of keep that shine. I'm not going to. I'm going to skip that stage. I think we've done plenty of these guys for them to work as is. So what I'm going to do is varnish them, and then I'm actually going to take you through the basing stages because today I'm going to try something a little different, and I'm hoping it doesn't go completely pear-shaped. So once these guys are varnished, I'm just going to pop the fellas off the corks. I'm going to pop the fellas off the corks. I'm going to do this off screen so I don't break anything. And then I'm going to make sure that I've got my Fusiliers in the right positions. And I will start gluing them down to this regiment base. So a little bit of glue in each spot. And there's my base of Fusiliers. Now let this dry for a few minutes. Now while I'm waiting for those other fellas to dry and set, what I'm going to do is paint oak brown onto the base itself. Okay, now I've laid down a clean sheet of printer paper just to catch what I'm about to do. You'll see why in a second. And I'm going to throw some PVA all over the base. Now, what I'm using today is the Kraut Cover base in a tub sort of things. I got sold these as Speedpaint but for bases, and I don't know. Like I said, I probably shouldn't experiment on camera, but I want to see, if this is going to work. If it does, cool. If it doesn't, oh my goodness. At least you saw the painted miniatures before it all went sideways. But making sure that that's got a nice thick coating on it, and then I'm going to tip this out and shake it, oh yeah, generously over the base there. Let's give that a little tap. Set that aside to dry for a couple of minutes. Okay, real quick, same with these guys, and hoping that this is gonna work. Oh god, that might be a bit much. Oh geez, this is why I laid down. This is why that paper is there. And once that's dried, that is, yeah, okay, that's not terrible. It's certainly, you could spend a little more time on the bases and have them look a bit nicer, but for a solution in a pot, that works a lot better than I thought it was going to do. Okay, let's get these fellas up for some photos. They are all done. And so, there at last, our French infantry are complete. Now, these guys are not the fastest way of doing things. I would recommend it's probably worth looking at some of the speed paint options if you want to really blast these guys out. But this strikes a balance, to my eye, between getting them done relatively quickly and getting them done so they look kind of nice on the table. I like trying to find the middle ground there. Now, the miniatures themselves, like I said from the outset, they are fabulous. They're really, really nice. And if you wanted to spend even more time on them, I think they would genuinely reward, look at the box art, they're fantastic miniatures. Somebody spending a bit more time on them, you're going to get just a gorgeous result. So thanks again to Wargames Atlantic for letting me have a box to play around with. Really appreciate it. As well, thanks goes to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of my wonderful patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue, which includes my gorgeous producers up on screen now. Thank you very much for your support, folks. Now, any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comment box below. My Blue Sky and Instagram are both linked there too. So, thank you, one and all, for your time today, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.